Hey guys, welcome back to Primer Podcast. We are back this week with Pete for our 6th week of the miracles of Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. We're looking at these marvels. And again, we look at another miracle that, yes, is marked by power and marvel and spectacle, but importantly, teaches us about who Jesus is and the implications of who Jesus is on our life as well. And so we're looking at the story of the healing of the blind man. I know you read this beforehand. It's a long story, so I'm not going to read the whole thing here. What'd you notice?
It's so different than the last miracle that we talked about with, where it was only for the last miracle was only for the disciples.
Right.
It was more private. So this one is again for others to see.
Yeah, in the public. And we see everybody's getting involved here.
Yeah.
We've got the crowds, we've got his neighbors, we've got his parents, we've got the Pharisees, we've got the disciples. Everybody's got a take on this miracle.
Yeah. And so so that's one of the similarities of one of the similarity of the miracle where Jesus healed the lame man.
Yeah. Yeah, the paralytic where he goes to the pool and heals him. How is it similar there?
So one is in front of a crowd.
Yep. Okay.
Some of the people didn't approach him. The person didn't approach him.
Right. The man didn't go to Jesus. Yeah. This man doesn't go to Jesus. Jesus goes to them.
And there's it's a like one of the other miracles I think of, and I actually get these two confused sometimes. Is where the blind man that asked Jesus. Yeah. And so this one's different.
Yeah. So right. So again, the focus is more on how Jesus is seeking out. Yeah. Which is important in our own faith journey, right? Jesus is seeking us out.
Yeah. And then those are the two bigger things.
It happens on the Sabbath day. Both of them are on the Sabbath day.
Yeah.
And then both of them find themselves confronting the Pharisees.
Right.
Because they're healing.
Right.
Right. And we talked about that with the paralytic, is like, this should be this moment of like spectacular celebration. Mm-hmm. This man has been blind since his birth, and now he suddenly sees, and yet the Pharisees...
That's not what they focus on.
They're not all that excited. They're like, boom, straight to, it was healing happened on the Sabbath day.
Right.
So, and the Pharisees, really, they're using this lens to do anything they can to dismiss Jesus. Mm-hmm. Right? And there's this space where they're just looking for the imperfections. Because if they can find an imperfection, they can dismiss the character of Jesus. They can dismiss the healings of Jesus. They can dismiss the work that's happening in this man. And at first it's like, well, how dare they do that to Jesus? Mm. Right? And that's how we should feel and how we should respond. It's like this visceral response. But on the other hand, I think we do the same thing all the time in our world, is that we look to the imperfections of others as why we're going to discredit the work of God in them. And so we have these sets of standards, and we're looking for, the perfect person that checks all the boxes, that does everything right. And we completely ignore the substance of their life, because we're just pointing to, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But I love, read for me in verse 25 how the blind man responds, because this is going to be a big difference between how the paralytic responds. Remember, the paralytic's like, I don't know.
Right.
Paralytic's like, and then when he finds out, he goes and rats him out. And now the Pharisees are going to be putting the screws to this man about Jesus's imperfections or blemishes. And I put them in quotes because obviously they are not. Mm-hmm. It's just their perception. And listen to the boldness of how the man responds so read 24 and 25.
So it says, a second time they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. He replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see.
Right. I love what happens here. And I think it should be such an invitation to you and I and all of the church and all those that are believers to say, look, our temptation is to dwell on the imperfections, to dwell on the faults, to dwell on the failures. And if we're looking for the scars of sin and shame and brokenness in the lives of others, we'll always find them, right? Always. We will always fall short of the glory of God. And yet, what does this man do? He says, look, I don't know. I don't know about what you qualify as sin, what you say is a blemish, what you say is a failure. All I know is that I was blind and I see now. All I know is what Jesus has done in me. And we talk about as a church that we want to be a church that's fruit focused. And I think that's the heart of that concept is to say we want to be a church that looks first for the transformation of God that dwells in us, for the fruit of the Spirit that dwells in us. How do we mark our lives as being transformed and changed? The presence of the fruit of the Spirit within us. This I was once blind, but now I see. And we look for that in ourselves, but we also look for that in others. And the reality is, the more and more we do that, the less and less those blemishes and that brokenness and that sin and that shame hold us captive, right? Because we begin to be freed of those things too. And it's just this shift, this change in how we engage with one another, but also how we engage with Jesus as his Spirit is testified to in their lives. Like so often, when I think we point out and we focus on the blemish, we focus on the failure, what we're doing is we're denying what Jesus is doing in someone's life in order to highlight the brokenness that has held them captive for years and years and years. And it's interesting because this boldness from this man, again, deviating from the paralytic, is going to have consequences. It says, to this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. Right? They're like, I don't want anything to do with this guy. Like, how dare you push back against us? And they throw him out of the temple. And that's like a big deal. That's not just nothing. That's like, hey, your community, your religious body, the people that you have put your hope in are like, we're done with you.
Yeah.
But then I love what happens next. And can you read verses 35 through 38? That'd be awesome.
Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man asked. Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have seen him. You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking to you. Then the man said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him.
Yeah. So what happens? It's different than the paralytic.
Right. So he was, the miracle was the healing of the physical element. It was the same, right? So Jesus still healed the lame man, but and so you see both being healed physically, but there's a spiritual difference in the man that was blind. Yeah.
So the paralytic, he was healed physically, but he remained crippled in his spirituality. He remained in this spiritual paralysis because ultimately when Jesus invited him to follow, he denied him, right? Here, the man has stood up for Jesus, first of all. And then what I love is that Jesus seeks him out again. Yeah. Right? And that's such a neat thing is like Jesus has this empathy for this blind man. And he goes and finds him. And then in that space, the blind man surrenders, and now Jesus not only gives him physical sight, but spiritual sight. And I just think that's this beautiful picture of Jesus coming to us, entering into that brokenness, into that hurt, when we rely upon that life that he's brought to us and redeeming us in those spaces. And so, really just a neat passage that I think should be an encouragement to us, but also a challenge to us.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. I think that the one thing. So just going back, to the miracle. So I guess my question as I read through it, and maybe this is very little emphasis, but I did question. It's like, why were the two miracles so different though? Because like in the one miracle where he talked about, he just asked the lame man to stand, but he physically did something different with the blind man. He used dirt and he spit, and so it's so different. Is there a significance there?
I don't know if there's a significance as to why he didn't do it with the paralytic. There's some intentionality. So the paralytic is at this pool, right? That is commonly believed to bring healing. Mm-hmm. So too, like spitting in dirt and rubbing it in the eyes, that's like repulsive to us.
Yeah.
But there was this feeling in the ancient world, especially in like Hellenistic cultures, that saliva held like restorative properties, right? And so what Jesus was doing wouldn't have been absolutely disgusting, right? It would have been like, okay, yeah, if he's a healer, this is a means of healing. Mm-hmm. But then second, it's really interesting, the pool that he sends him to.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's called the Pool of Siloam. Mm-hmm. And it says that also means the water was sent. John talks about Jesus as the one that was sent 21 times, right? So there's this parallel, and it's this really beautiful allegory, in my opinion. So the Pool of Siloam is fed by, and we're going to go through this really quick, but on Sunday we talk about it a little bit more. Like, it's fed by this spring called the Spring of Gihon. And the Spring of Gihon is the only freshwater source for Jerusalem, so it's really important. But it exists outside of the walls of Jerusalem at the time. And in the 8th century, under King Hezekiah, Jerusalem was about to fall siege to the Assyrian Empire. And one of the things the Assyrian Empire did to conquer villages and cities would be to compromise the water source for the people, whether by damming it up or by poisoning it. And so there's this huge vulnerability for Israel. And so Hezekiah commands them to go 140 feet down underneath the surface of the earth and then cut through the bedrock 1,750 feet to the spring. And essentially what he does is he reroutes the spring water through the bedrock all the way to the city, and it dries up the spring at the surface there, right? And so it keeps them protected in the midst of this. It brings them this living water, this life-giving water that allows them to resist the siege there. But one of the craziest parts was it was an impossible task because the Assyrians were coming so quickly, they wouldn't have the time to cut through the bedrock. And so Hezekiah commands one group to excavate from one side and the other from the side of Jerusalem. And it's this curvy, windy tunnel. I've been in it. The water is like knee-deep water that goes through, and it meets perfectly in the middle. And it should not, they don't have any tools to do this. Somehow, 140 feet under, digging through solid bedrock, they meet in the middle, and it spares Jerusalem of this attack from Assyria. And what I draw from that, and Jesus' intentionality of inviting him to experience the healing of his physical blindness from this well, is this idea of this spiritual blindness being healed in the same way, whereas Jesus' spirit is penetrating through the darkness and the hardness of our hearts in a way that doesn't make sense. It doesn't work, and yet he enters in and brings us this life. And so I think there's this beautiful poetry and imagery that Jesus is alluding to here. We know that John uses details for a reason.
Right.
And so I think that's why that portion has been included, is it's calling back on some history for all those that would have been familiar with it, but continues to be relevant to us today.
Yeah. Well, I knew there had to be some significance because, like you said, John always makes sure that it's very specific in his details. Exactly. And then, of course, Jesus isn't going to do something for no reason.
Right.
And so I thought that was a pretty interesting detail of it.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, hopefully you guys can get deeper into the scripture of this miracle and have a great discussion with your group or your individual study. We'll see you next week.
Exactly. And also mark your calendars, September 7th, just a couple of weeks away. We start our For Your Neighbors series and kick off our generosity campaign. That's going to be so important for our future. And so we hope to see you there as well.